On today's episode of What's Going On with Shipping, are we out of diesel? Hi, I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. So this question about diesel fuel, I addressed specifically in last week's What the Ship. Did a whole segment, story number 3 of episode 56. We talked about this. However, there's been a lot more discussion about it, especially raised by an article by Lorianne Larocco over at CNBC. So I thought I'd take Lorianne's article, break it down, use it as the basis for some updated information, and really look at the facts behind Lorianne's story. So if you're new to the channel, take a second, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. All right, let's jump into this. All right, this is Lorianne's piece out on October 30th, 2022. The diesel market is in a perfect storm as prices surge, supply dwindles ahead of winter. And so she's talking about a couple of things. Number one, diesel prices have increased 33% since November. So we've seen diesel prices go up through the roof. Diesel supply in the northeast, along with issues on the Mississippi River with a big, huge drought, potential rail strike, all are sitting there with the federal government poised to intervene to try to increase supply. And then finally, diesel reserves have not been this low since 1951, and a ban on Russian products set for next year is going to impact further the supply of diesel. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. And she has 3 major areas she focuses in on. First, she talks about, gives you the history in the background, which is great. But I want to come to this. So the first part right here, East Coast refineries operating at max capacity. And I think the refinery issue is the key right here. I got to say how important this aspect of the story is. So we're going to go over to the EIA, the Energy Information Agency, and their report. So the first report I pulled up is this: U.S. number of operable refineries as of January 1st. And one of the things you see is that the number of refineries has done nothing but decrease. So if you go back to 1982 to be specific, you have 301 refineries in the United States. If you go to 2021, we have 129. 2022, we added 1. So we ticked up. That was the first time you saw really a tick up on this. And that's a big issue. If you looked at refining capacity, it's basically flat. I mean, it dips and peaks a little bit here. It actually goes down quite a bit and then comes back up, and it's kind of plateaued and stayed right around where it is. And one of the big issues that the United States has had is we're just not building any refineries. And if you don't believe me, they actually have a fact about this. Obviously, this question gets asked so often. They're specifically asked about this. When was the last refinery built in the United States? And it goes in here. The newest refinery in the United States is the Texas International Terminal's 45,000 barrel per day refinery in Channelview, Texas, which became operable on January 1st. However, the newest refinery with significant downstream unit capacity is Marathon's facility in Garyville, Louisiana, which came in line in, wait for it, 1977. That's the last time a major refinery came online, was 1977. And one of the themes I talk about in shipping all the time is consolidation. How much shipping has been consolidated together into these huge behemoth companies. We talk about the 10 biggest shipping firms controlling 85% of the container capacity. Well, refinery capacity is very much the same way. Matter of fact, they have this on the EIA website, the genealogy of refineries. And one of the things you see here is, man, we're only down to a few major refineries in this country. BP, Husky, Valero, BBP Energy, and the Carlyle Group. And what we're seeing here is a lack of refining capacity in the United States. This is absolutely key. If you do not have the refining capacity, this is a big problem. And remember, one of the big issues is the type of oil we're getting out of the ground. Today, we're getting shale oil out of the ground. That requires a unique refinery. The older refineries we have are designed for the much heavier sour crude, not this lighter, sweeter crude that's coming out of the ground, which means we're in the position of having to export oil out of the United States because we don't have the refining capacity to refine it in the United States. And we actually have to import oil in while we're exporting oil out because it's the wrong type of oil we have. This is the formula for insane policies. And that's the policies we're operating under. All right, go to the next aspect of this story, which is down here. Jones Act restrictions on foreign vessels. So this is the one, I'm not going to lie, that got me a little bit fired up for some strange reason. Those of you who follow my channel, follow me on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, on, smoke signals, know that the Jones Act is one of my little pet peeves. And it's not because I am a staunch advocate for the Jones Act. I believe we need massive reform of this bill. We haven't had a major reform literally since the 1970s. It needs to be reformed. However, I am against the idea that if you repeal the Jones Act, it solves all the world's problems and rainbows and unicorns will forever dance around the world. So it goes on here to this part of the story, and I want to read a quote. The Jones Act requires all cargo transported between U.S. ports to be carried on ships that are U.S. flagged and built and mostly owned and crewed by Americans. That's Captain Adil Ashik, United States Western Region Executive for Marine Traffic. Love marine traffic. According to Marine Traffic, the 55 Jones Act tankers are being used. One way to add more supply quickly is for the Department of Homeland Security to temporarily waive the act for the foreign vessels. This is from Lorianne's article now. To move the fuel. The Jones Act was last waived for a tanker filled with diesel from the Gulf to go to hurricane-stricken Puerto Rico, where the energy was needed for power generators. All right, I've dealt with this. You can watch an entire video on this where I'd say that's complete, what's the word I'm looking for? Bullshit. It's complete bullshit. That was a move by BP to get diesel offloaded there when it wasn't needed. It wasn't. There was fuel on the island. The problem was distribution throughout the island. But the administration, particularly Secretary of Homeland Security Mayorkas, refused to listen to what was told to him and granted a waiver because of political pressure. Sorry, that's the way it is. That's the clear way it is. Watch my video and I break that down specifically. So the problem I have with this part of the article is this paragraph right here. As a result of the small quantity of U.S.-owned and operated tankers available for energy transport, the price to book a Jones Act tanker is about double of that of a foreign flag tanker. For example, a Jones Act tanker carrying 300,000 barrels of diesel from Houston to Boston cost approximately 16 cents per gallon. If the Jones Act was waived, again, magically, rainbows and unicorns, a foreign flag tanker carrying the same amount of fuel and heading to the identical location is estimated to cost half, 8 cents per gallon. This 8 cents per gallon difference translates into $1 million of savings per tanker. This is one of the reasons why energy traders favor using the foreign flag tankers versus the Jones Act tankers. Okay, hang on a second. Number one, last sentence there, most important. This is one of the reasons why energy traders favor using foreign flag tankers versus Jones Act tankers. Okay, do you think you're going to see that savings, or are the energy traders going to pocket that $1 million? But suffice it to say, let's not even do that. Let's just talk about the 8 cents differential between here, because I asked Lorianne specifically, where'd you get the math for this? And she said, from the energy traders. All right, I went to a shipping firm, and I went to a shipping firm that is involved in this trade, and they broke down the math for me, and this is the math they broke down. Now, they did it from a voyage from Houston to New York, so it's a little less than going to Boston. For a Jones Act tanker, the cost per gallon is 12.6 cents a gallon. So if you use a Jones Act tanker, the additional charter rate for, again, you're paying for an American crew. Remember, a foreign flag crew gets about $20-something per day. So you're paying more for that American ship. Obviously, the construction costs, the operating costs, you're paying more. The foreign tanker pays 8.3 cents per gallon. So there's a difference of 4 cents a gallon. Not 8, as according to the energy brokers, but 4 cents a gallon. But hang on a minute. It doesn't mean if you waive the Jones Act tomorrow, you're going to see a 4 cents per gallon saving at the pump. Instead, you have to remember that all the fuel going up to New England and Mid-Atlantic, 70% of that, which is what's called the PADD1 region, according to the EIA, gets there by pipeline. 70% travels by pipeline. So only 30% goes by tanker. So if you magically change this now and you take the 30% of the 4 cents, it comes down to 1.3 cents. Yes, you save a grand total of 1.3 cents per gallon on a Jones Act tanker. So it's not 8 cents. And it's not $1 million that you would save as the consumer. It's $1 million that the energy traders want. And let me be clear, those energy traders, BP, Valero, Carlyle Group, all these guys would love to have foreign tankers used all the time because it is immensely cheaper than having to use U.S. tankers. Now, You're sitting there going, well, wait a minute, Sal, it sounds smart. Let's use the cheapest available tankers for us. However, understand, Jones Act tankers are in a dedicated service. They're providing service just between the United States. You would have to book foreign tankers from worldwide, meaning that they would have to sail, deploy, you would have to pay for part of that voyage. So the cost you're saving in deployment would negate whatever extra you're saving by using that foreign tanker at time. And again, this is the part of the equation that most people, especially energy traders, don't want to talk about. She then has this quote from Andy Lipow, who runs Lipow Oil Associates, who's an oil broker, and he says this: if the Biden administration wants to replenish New England gasoline or distillate inventories at the expense of exports, they need to waive the Jones Act for refined products loading on the Gulf Coast for delivery to New York, New Jersey, and New England. Unfortunately, I don't think they will do it until it is too late. No, number one, let's be clear. I ran a story the other day in my What the Ship, where oilprice.com had a story talking about the diesel shortage and said that only now, the Colonial Pipeline is moving at its capacity. In other words, the pipelines of the Colonial Pipeline are now full. And so now they're moving fuel up to New England area, up to the New Jersey area is where the pipeline terminates. But remember, it only moves at 5 miles an hour. So it takes 16, 18 days for the fuel to get up there. So again, this is the oil brokers and energy brokers playing with the system. Let's go to this last part here, part number 3. Traders profit, Russia ban looms. Traders are diverting tankers away from Europe to the U.S. because the price of U.S. diesel is now higher than in Europe, so they can make a larger profit. So far, 2 tankers have arrived and unloaded. According to Marine Traffic, the tanker Thundercat, go! was originally destined for the Netherlands after being loaded in the Middle East with about 650,000 barrels of diesel. It went to New York. Another tanker, the Proteus Jessica, loaded in Singapore area with a similar diesel supply, also heading to New York. Singapore, you may want to check, make sure it's not Russian. For regions including New England, competition with Europe for diesel supply is intensifying. Okay, hang on a second. Let's be clear about this. Traders are now diverting away from Europe, which means that traders were diverting to Europe prior to this, which means they were taking diesel out of the United States and heading over. Looks like it's time for This Week in Petroleum, folks. My favorite chart. Here you go. Distillate stocks in the United States. So we are below the 5-year average of distillate stocks. You see us right here. We're sitting at about 110 million barrels, whereas before we're anywhere from 120 up to almost 150 million barrels. So we are down in our supplies of distillate. Distillate is diesel. I'm just using diesel for today's example. Come over here to days of supply. This is one of the things that Lorianne talks about in the story at the beginning, how much diesel we had. And you see right here that our days of supply, we're hitting there right around 25 days of supply, whereas last year we were right around 30 days of supply. So we're about 5 days less supply than we're normally at. Let's go ahead and scroll down this report a little bit and look at this. So now we're looking at distillate production, imports, exports. So one of the things you should notice right here is this is talking about distillate production, million barrels per day. We are up this year over last year. So diesel production has increased this past year. And if you look again at this chart where we stand, we're right now sitting at about 5 million barrels per day. At the same time last year, we were making a little bit less, probably about 4.6 million. So we've increased 400,000 barrels per day. Let's go down to the next chart here for a second. This is looking at diesel demand at about 4 million barrels per day. So we're sitting right at about a little over 4, maybe 4.1 million barrels today. So demand is 4.1 million barrels. And again, come back up here, production. Where's our production chart? There we go. There's our production chart. We're producing, again, we need 4.1. We're producing almost 5 million barrels a day. Well, hang on, Sal. If we're producing 5 million barrels per day, and we're consuming 4.1 million barrels a day, there's more. We should have excess capacity. Where, pray tell, has the excess gone? Well, let's break this down into exports. Seem to have the answer here. Exports out of the United States in million barrels per day. We are exporting 1.2, 1.3 million barrels of diesel fuel a day out. That's how much we're doing. We're over the list from last year. So Where's that difference going? Well, it's being exported out of the United States. Why is it being exported out of the United States? It's being exported out of the United States because the demand for it equals higher prices is in places like Europe. And energy speculators, oil speculators, gas speculators, these brokers have been taking, and I ran a story on this earlier this year, they took tanker loads of diesel out of the New York region and sailed it over to Europe because they were getting more for that load than they were in the United States. That's where it's happening. And I know the issue is the knee-jerk issue here. It's the Jones Act. If only the Jones Act was waived, all this would be resolved. No. Understand, I think it would be worse. Because when you look at Jones Act tankers, and look, there they are. There are the Jones Act tankers that are right now sailing off the coast of the United States. There you go. Let's zoom out here a little bit. These are just the ones here that are in the Gulf Coast and New England. Now you can look at the ones over there, but I just want to focus on these right here. There are tankers. There's a whole group of them heading up to New York, New Jersey right now, heading up, one coming back down from the region. But the vast majority of these tankers are used to supply Florida because Florida's not in the pipeline system. So you get a batch of them heading into Florida. You have tankers that are heading into New York, New Jersey right now. A lot of them are crude carriers, bringing in crude oil to the refineries there. Why? Because you don't move crude oil up the pipeline. You only move clean, refined product up the pipeline. So you got to bring crude oil up. So some of these tankers are crude tankers that bring crude oil up. But you got to bring the right crude in. You can't take the shale oil that we have and use it in some of those refineries. You got to get this heavy, nasty oil from overseas and bring it up. And what we should be talking about here is why this is happening. And again, Lorianne does a great story. I love her stuff a lot. But again, is the issue the Jones Act? It sounds great. Hey, repeal the Jones Act and all my problems are solved. But are they? Because what you're going to lose are those tankers right there. Because if you repeal the Jones Act, you're going to lose those tankers that are in dedicated service between the U.S. coast. Those tankers don't go anywhere. They work the U.S. East Gulf Coast. They work the West Coast. They provide dedicated service. Now, let me be clear. If there's an emergency and you need to supplement it, hey, heck yeah, waive it in a second. I'd be the first one to tell you to waive it. When you can't get energy in and you need energy desperately, of course, you waive this act and you set it in. But what we're not talking about is increasing the number of tankers in our fleet. Understand, what happened here is in the 1960s and 70s, we built the interstate pipeline system. That reduced the tanker fleet tremendously because you didn't need as much. What you need were basically crude tankers going up to refineries. Then in late 1900s, 1990s, in 1980s, 1990s, started cutting back on refineries, started cutting back on capacity. You started losing that. We also had the oil spill up in Exxon Valdez in 1989, which required all tankers in the United States to be double hulled, which created a new wave of tankers being built through the 1990s into the 2000s. Well, we haven't built new tankers in this country since the early 2000s, and we're in desperate need to replace the tankers we have and supplement them. The military, watch my video on the Red Hill oil facility, fuel facility closing in Hawaii. The Department of Defense is screaming that they need commercial tankers to supplement them. And yet, right here, you're seeing us arguing that we should get rid of the Jones Act and get rid of these dedicated tankers. This impacts not just the delivery of fuel to you, the consumer, but also our ability to support our military overseas. That was the whole purpose of the Merchant Marine Act of 1920, was to create a strategy, a national maritime strategy that included both commercial and military. Has it worked perfectly? No, because it's been 100 freaking years since the act has been passed. Yes, we need to change it. Global shipping has changed. Nobody foresaw that Panama, Liberia, and Marshall Islands would be the major shippers in the world, or that the Philippines, Russia, China, India, and Indonesia would be providing the bulk of most seafarers in the world. Nobody saw that. Nobody saw containerization. Nobody foresaw the creation of the supertanker or the bulk carrier. That's why you need to change this. But the problem is, as always in this country, is we wait to change legislation after the fact. We're not proactive, we're reactive, and we're lousy at being reactive. That's why we find ourselves in the situation we are. We're not running out of diesel fuel. We're not running out of diesel fuel at all. But those same energy brokers that are giving you the advice to repeal the Jones Act and, what would make things cheaper for you is if you do this, take it with a grain of salt. Because that $1 million that they save in repealing the Jones Act doesn't go into your pocket, it goes into their pocket. Hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, give it a thumbs up. Sure, give it a thumbs up because it's a great freaking video, and I like this video, and you should like it too. Give it a thumbs up, and if you can, support the channel. How do you support the channel? Well, number one, take some of that $1 million that you're going to give to the oil brokers and give it to me, so that I can put videos out like this. How do you do that? Easy. You hit that super thanks button down below. You can contribute directly to the page, or better yet, head on over to Patreon. You'll see a link at the end of the video. Click on that. You become a monthly or yearly subscriber for as little as $2. And that allows me to bring these videos that make the oil companies very, very upset with me. And also those who support the Jones Act, which are usually funded by the oil companies. Until the next video, this is Sal, signing off.